Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan. We're out the Motor City Mad Mouth. We have a great show, and we have a great addition. And no, we're not talking about addition, subtraction, and math, my worst subject on the planet. Just a great addition to the crew. And I'm going to start off with that addition. Chris Pirtle, welcome to the Sports Exchange and the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Scott. Good to be with you this evening.
Why don't you give us a little bit of background on yourself, Chris? Because I've listened to some of your stuff. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Well, thank you, Scott. Appreciate that. I do radio segments on stations throughout the country, mainly talking NBA. I've been doing that since 2014, so hard to believe it's been 9 years now. I also am the host of the Sports Junkies, which was on AM 1370 and FM 107.9 WAXE out of Vero Beach. The show has it's going on a little hiatus right now, so I'm not doing that, but still doing the segments. And I'm happy to be on with you guys tonight talking sports.
And not only that, we're looking for you to obviously be a good addition to our commentating team. And I know your primary focus will be on the NBA. And of course, I know you're a big Jacksonville Jaguars guy, so you'll have an opportunity to talk about the Jaguars as well. So we're very pleasantly delighted to add you to our team. You know, again, like I told you, you know, you can never find enough good people to work in your program. And I screen a lot of my people out very well. And let me tell you, my instinct is somebody to bring somebody on after a phone conversation. I do. And that's why I'm so delighted to welcome you on behalf of myself and the rest of my team. Chris, we're looking forward to some great shows with you going forward.
Me too, Scott. And again, thanks for the kind words and happy to be here.
All right. Well, next member of our team, Rick Curdy, a.k.a. Mr. Opinion. Welcome back, Rick. I know you had the hat trick this week of shows. Glad to have you back on.
I'm glad to be here. I'm the Mario Lemieux of this show. It's my third straight show, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, I thought you were going to mention Alex Ovechkin. Oh, goodness.
No, I go way back. Lemieux, Gretzky, all that stuff.
I don't know you knew anything about hockey except you don't like the fighting there, right?
No, I just like I'm a Gretzky guy. I like seeing Gretzky. I'm not into the fighting.
I'm with you. Well, George Eichhorn and I can say that we're both Gordie Howe guys, right, George? And
I'm a Gordie Howe and Steve Eiserman guy.
Yeah, and
welcome. George, good to be part of it.
And Chris, as you know, George and I have been working together 43 years, so that's all. So together 43 years. Yeah, I'd say we have a.
We gave each other gray hair, Chris.
Yeah, we did. There were other people that did too, but I'm not going to divulge those individuals. And last but not least, Smoking Jeremy B.
Oh, how's it going, everybody? Glad to be back, ready to talk a little sports. I had a lot of fun talking on every show that Scott puts me on. Whenever he puts me on, I just do whatever he needs.
Yeah, no, like I said, yeah. One thing I've been so fortunate about is finding new talent. So I just want to let everybody know that the Sports Exchange can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. So whether you're driving, walking, whatever, that's where you can hear it. Also, please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Also, you want to be a guest? No problem. Send your topic ideas to South Florida Tribune at gmail.com. And if you want to advertise, give me a call at 954-304-4941. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. So there's a lot of different ways you can find us out. If that isn't good enough, you want to go ahead and Google us on Google. You'll find our stuff. We're all over the place. So with that said, it's going to be NBA talk tonight. And Mr. NBA Chris Pirtle, I'm going to break you in the way you're going to keep moving with you every week.
You forgot something, sir.
About your specialty NBA. All right. So we're going to hit Mr. Pirtle up first, and this is the order we're going to go in. But go ahead, Jeremy. Let everybody know what I forgot to mention because at least I know you cover my back end. Go ahead.
And don't forget, when you hit that red subscribe button on YouTube, go ahead and like the show and then share it with all your sports fans.
There you go. Your crew picks you up. All right. Well, one of Rick Curdy's favorite topics, and generally turns out to be a rant, but now we get to make it into topic, is NBA commissioner. Okay. Do you like David Stern or Adam Silver better, Mr. Pirtle?
It's a good question. Very good question. I think if I had to pick somebody, I I guess I would have to pick Adam Silver. I like the way that he's been able to make adjustments. He's only been the commissioner, 5-6 years now, it seems like.
Right.
And there's been a lot of stuff that's happened in the NBA. We've seen a change. We've seen a change in the way that the playoffs are now done with the play-in game. I like, at first it took some getting used to, but I thought after I reviewed it and looked back on it, turned out to be a great situation. If you look at the Western Conference standings, for example, right now, there's only 2 teams out of the entire Western Conference that don't even have a chance to qualify for the play-in game or the playoffs. So I think it's a great thing when you can keep all those teams involved. So there's been a lot of decisions that Adam Silver's had to make. Some are somewhat more popular than others. You can't get them all right, but for overall, I think he's done a pretty nice job. Not to discredit David Stern, because David Stern took the league when it was nothing and made it something huge. So it's, like I said, it's a good question. You caught me off guard with the question, but to give you an answer that I feel comfortable with, I will say Adam Silver.
Well, Chris, I usually catch everybody off guard with my questions. So, and I don't try to say that they're good or bad. It's just when it comes to this kind of stuff here, I just feel like I like to hit direct, strong topics that a lot of people definitely take notice of for sure. So by all means, and I've always had that thing between the two. I'll get to my comments afterward, but I have a feeling I know where Rick is going with it. Right, Rick? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I respectfully disagree with you, Chris. I mean, comparing Adam Silver and David Stern, it's like filet mignon or roast beef. I mean, I am a huge David Stern fan. He was a great commissioner. He ruled with an iron fist. All this load management and these guys taking time off and playing whenever they want to play, and all these ticky-tack fouls and the flopping, that would never be happening with David Stern. LeBron would be fined all the time because of his antics. I mean, it was great with him. I haven't watched an NBA game like in probably 15, 16 years because it's all shooting. There is no defense. I miss the bad boys of Bill Lane Beer and all that, and Rick Mahorn, and today's players, I don't think they could survive the 80s and 90s. I know LeBron couldn't. So I love David Stern. I miss him. He was great. He just ruled the league. He didn't care who you were. And that's who we need. To me, Adam Silver is nothing but a doormat.
George?
Yeah, I'm going to go with David Stern also. I had the opportunity, as you did, Scott, when the Pistons were in the conference finals and in the NBA finals. We saw David a lot. He came to all the games at the Palace of Auburn Hills. He had a very, very strong relationship with Mr. Davidson, the owner of the Detroit Pistons. And you look at the teams that excelled under that era and the individual stars, Bird and Magic and Isaiah and Michaeljordan and all the rest of them. I mean, it was a special time for the NBA. And don't forget, he had a lot of important issues, too, that he settled. There was union unrest. There were huge television contracts to negotiate. And granted, Silver now has bigger television contracts to negotiate than David did. But, everything costs more nowadays. But Stern was a good man. I enjoyed the time that he came to Detroit many times for the playoffs and all that. And I think, like you said, Rick, today's players could not even excel in the environment that we were used to when fouls were allowed, when going to the hole was a regular thing, not just occasionally in a game. I'm not a big fan of the 3-point shooters, and I've said that before, but I give mine strongly to Stern. He's like the Peterozelle of the NBA, David Stern, in history.
That's a great comparison. It really is. All right, Jeremy, what do you think?
It's really apples to oranges. If you remember, the whole flopping thing started before David Stern retired. LeBron's been in the league now how many years? He was in when David Stern was in. He did the same shit when he was there. I'm sorry, didn't mean to go there, but LeBron's been doing this his whole career. The flopping, the taking time off, the load management. It's been his entire career. Go back. He has never played 82 games.
Okay. Well,
so that being said, I think Adam Silver is doing the best with what he has in this social media society.
Right.
But it's two different eras. You know, David Stern was the end of that defensive era when people would go to the rack instead of taking the 3-point shot. The 3-point shot started before Adam Silver got in.
Yeah. The only thing I could say is, yeah, I'm also a Stern guy, but, and pun intended, as well as a David Stern guy. Had to get that in. Sorry. But anyways, I remember when David Stern took over the league was on tape delay. Okay. It was bankrupt. It was in bad shape. Ever heard of Larry Bird, Magic Johnson? Okay. They're the reasons that these guys are making the money that they're making. And this league was bankrupt practically. And when I'm able to go ahead and work at a restaurant at night and my shift doesn't end until 11:30 and I'm watching the NBA finals, and I got to admit it worked for me, but I'm not so sure that anybody else that is on the East Coast really wanted to see it in tape delay. So if for no other reason, you know, you think about where he took the league. Let's face it, Larry O'Brien did all right with the league, but, you know, obviously David Stern elevated it to such a point where Adam Silver inherited a much better situation than what Stern did. And, you know, you need a disciplinarian. And a lot of these players probably could not handle the discipline that it did. Also, there was a physical brand of basketball. From what people have told me, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the 3-point shots replaced the dunks to me as a new trend in this new NBA. And I don't know, you know, you and I talked on the phone and you relish how much you like the Bad Boys, right, Chris? Well, yeah. So David Stern presided over an era for which the Bad Boys had their success. So I don't know, you know, to me, I have to go with Dave, but you can rebuttal this if you want to, Chris. And if there's anything I mentioned, feel free to do it.
Well, I think great points made by everybody involved here. I would say, you know, David Stern definitely left the league much better than when he got there and what he inherited, as you indicated, Scott. You know, the NBA Finals on a tape delay compared to when he left. I guess it was about 10 years ago that David Stern was retired from being the commissioner of the NBA. It seems like right around 10 years ago, around 2013, 2014, in that neighborhood. So he certainly left it much better than he found it. Can the same be said for Adam Silver? Probably not. I mean, if you look at what's going on now compared to when he inherited it, ratings may be down a little bit. As Rick said, he hasn't watched it in 15 years. So, I mean, there's something to be said for that. I just think that Silver has had to deal with some more complex issues than what David Stern dealt with. But like you said, George, there was some stuff that had to be dealt with when David Stern was there, and he dealt with it quite nicely. So I certainly, like I said, don't want to discredit anything David Stern did. I just think that Silver's had to deal with some really, really complex issues, and I've got to give him credit for the most part on the way he's handled those.
Yeah, and two of the things that he's had to deal with, number one, is the situation with Donald Sterling. You know, that situation was bad, and so I'm glad that he put his foot down and blew him out. And now the problems that you're having in Phoenix, obviously, to Silver's credit, he's handled that pretty well. So I have no problem there. Those are tough, you know, sensitive type of things that he's had to deal with. The only thing I would hope he doesn't do is have a mid-season tournament. I think that would be awful. Don't do that. The play-in tournament, I got no problem because, like you alluded to, Chris, all right, that, you know, you still have a lot of teams that could still get in, and you're keeping it interesting into March and maybe even early April. So I'll give them that. You know, it's okay to make a change, but don't sit here and think that you're going to redo the wheel, because James Naismith didn't ever think about in conference tournaments, in season tournaments. Okay. And I don't even think James Naismith would ever go out there and say that a 3-pointer was going to go ahead and supersede a layup/dunk, the conventional 3-point play, you know, but that's a hypothetical. But, you know, I mean, Silver's done what he's got to do, but I'm going to tell you one thing that leads me to my next topic, okay, and that is load management. Guys like Charles Barkley and Magic Johnson, Chris, are speaking out against everybody is. I met Charles Barkley, I believe, last summer over at the National Sports Media Association, and I think Charles, I took a picture with him on my Facebook thing. You look at it, And I said, Charles, thank you very much for telling everybody what we all want to tell you because you have a higher voice. And let me tell you, when you talk about load management, I can tell you this right now. I do believe it's killing the NBA. But you know what, Chris? You're a resident NBA guy. And this show and going forward, you're going to get first word in, and you can also rebuttal what we say. How's that? Load management. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Not good. Not a good situation. I've got to agree with Charles Barkley and some of the other guys. And hard to believe, this all started back in 2012. So 11 years ago with Greg Popovich resting Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and I believe Ginobili in a game. And then we saw it just escalate from there. And not only do you have load management, you've got personal reasons. I've seen a couple other ones that are very similar, to that description. So, yeah, it's not a good situation. It can't be good for ticket sales, can't be good for television ratings if you don't know who's going to be playing on certain nights. So, yeah, it's not a good situation, and it does need to be addressed. What's the good answer? What's a good solution? I don't know. If you got players going on back-to-backs and you're a coach like Greg Popovich, I mean, he's about as old school as it gets, I would think. Right. And he's the one who started this fire. So what the solution is, I don't know, but I do know this, and I agree, it is a problem.
Well, not only that, too, about the problem. What about the next collective bargaining agreement, for crying out loud? You think the owners aren't taking notes mentally? It's like, we're not putting up with this, killing our game. CBA, Chris. I mean, that the players better be glad they're doing what they got to do, because I don't think they have a leg to stand on, when the next CBA is up.
How, I guess the questions are, how bad is attendance down drastically, or ratings down drastically? If that's the case, then obviously, as you indicated in the CBA, there will be some things that'll need to be rectified.
Okay, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, it's awful. I mean, you have players coming out now. There's one player came out and said that people are getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, working 12-hour shifts and killing themselves, and they're too tired to go to a game. And then when they go to a game, LeBron's out because he sprained his pinky or something. These players, a lot of them don't want to play. Look at Kyrieirving. He wanted in his contract that he didn't want to play back-to-back games with the Nets. How ludicrous is that? Or Ben Simmons or even LeBron. These guys, they don't want to play anymore. They're making so much money, and that's where I get upset with Adam Silver, because David Stern would not put up with it. He would tell him, get your butt on the court, play. These people are paying lots and lots of money to see you play, and when you don't play, they're going to get upset. That's why a lot of them are not going to these games. So this load management has gotten so out of control now, and these players now, they only play when they feel like playing.
All right, George.
Yeah, you mentioned, Chris, about attendance, and believe it or not, the Pistons' attendance is up from last year. They have been drawing really good crowds at our new Little Caesars Arena downtown. And I say that because I put it in the context of all the players that have missed games this year. And Jeremy, you know this, all these Piston injuries, the injury report's a mile long. And like you alluded to, Rick, they sprained pinky or whatever the hell is bothering them. But I mean, it's crazy.
Divas.
It's like 3 to 5 guys every game that Dwayne Casey does not have available to suit up here in a Piston uniform. And that is a crying shame, like you said, to the fans that paid the good money. And a lot of them really are happy that the team moved back downtown, which is a whole nother story. But all I'm saying is that I can't understand this. Okay, you put the best performance, the best equipment. These guys had the best doctors available in training and masseurs and everything else. And yet we have so many injuries. I mean, in Detroit, especially, it's like, oh my God, the list is a mile long. So all I'm saying is that, yeah, some guys are slouching, and it sure looks obvious in some of the situations I see here in my hometown.
Jeremy?
Load management does stink. But at the same time, I remember when the Bulls came to play the Pistons back in the heyday and Jordan didn't play. I remember fast forwarding to 2004, 2005 when the Pistons were still doing good with the the go to work Pistons,
Yeah,
Chauncey and everybody. And you'd go there, and Ben Wallace wouldn't be playing one night, or Rashid wouldn't be playing one night, or Chauncey even wouldn't be playing one night. Those guys, every team has done load management over the years. It's just gotten more prevalent as of late. But it started getting prevalent back then and progressively got worse until Adam Silver took over. That's what I noticed. But as far as our Pistons having injuries, I wouldn't want to pay for Dwayne Casey either. Fire him.
Well, I can tell you one thing. Michael Jordan's one of those kind of guys that never like to take games off anyways. I don't think he missed many games in his career. I don't have it in front of me.
He averaged 6 games a year.
He what?
He averaged missing 6 games a year.
Well, that's not bad. At least
it's not bad. No, I'm just saying. But one of them I remember was when I went to watch him because I didn't go to watch the Pistons. They were already good. They already won the year before. I went to see Jordan.
Jordan and I had the good fortune of watching a lot of Pistons Bulls game as well. But but Michael Jordan, and nobody will ever refute that. Maybe in future shows, Chris will ask you to compare LeBron and Michael, but we won't tonight. I just wanted to take care of some.
I'd love that because Jordan's better.
That's what
Jordan's better.
And the reality, going back, whether it's 20, 30 years, is some players are just more injury prone than others. You look at a guy like Dwayne Wade. When he teamed up with LeBron James in Miami, there were years that Dwayne Wade would miss upwards of 30 games.
Right.
And yet LeBron James had to carry the load back then. James was a little bit younger than Dwayne Wade, but he was certainly carrying the load, and he was probably missing an average of 6 or 7 games during his 4-year stint in Miami. So, and guys get a little bit older, so he's got an excuse now. He's 38, so we at least got to give him that. But, you look at a guy like Kyrieirving, constantly injured, whether he's not injured or he's doing something that's off the wall. So there are some players that are just definitely more injury prone than others. I think we need to take that into consideration. But obviously load management is a problem, though. We can't deny that.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is at the rate we're going with load management, get ready. Tape delay is coming back. Okay, if I'm being sarcastic, I don't know. We'll see.
I wouldn't mind it at this point.
Well, I wouldn't mind either. When the show would be done, I could watch it. But we'll leave that for another time. But I'll tell you what, Chris, you do a great job segueing to my next topic. So we'll talk about some injuries, okay? And actually, Rick Curdy kind of brought this up last night on the Sports Exchange. So I'm going to talk about 3 particular players, Chris. Gregoden, Sambowie, Zionwilliamson. Which is a more unfortunate situation? Would you classify them as a bust?
Okay, just so I'm clear, what's the actual question again?
All right, Gregoden, Sambowie, Zionwilliamson, as you would say, everybody would say injury prone, and they had great careers, promising careers, but the injury bug caught up with them, which is a really unfortunate situation. Would you classify these particular players as a bust?
You have to, unfortunately. Even though injuries are, I guess, a natural thing, but the bottom line is they did not live up to the expectations that people had for them, or up to the expectation of where they were drafted. You look at a guy like Sambowie. I believe was he number 2 overall pick?
Right. And Jordan
number 2 overall.
Elijah was number 1.
Yeah, and Gregoden was number 1. Gregoden was a guy who led his team in college basketball to the national title game with Mike Conley that year in 2006. That was so huge expectations for Oden, and it never materialized. He was able to obviously come back and have that brief stint with the Miami Heat, which never materialized anything either. So you have to classify him as a bust for whatever reason. In their particular case, it was injury.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, I mean, Sambowie, I mean, when they always used to say when you draft, you're going to draft, you make a big mistake. But I'll tell you what, these are big mistakes that are 7-foot mistakes where you're actually drafted for need. And obviously, because of the ankle and the leg injuries with these big men, it's unfortunate that their careers certainly were not as good as they project to be. All right, Rick?
Yeah, unfortunately, Sambowie, anytime you're picked ahead of Jordan, and you don't fulfill his expectations, you're going to be a bust. And unfortunately for him, he was just injury prone. I remember seeing him play, and you're like, this guy got picked ahead of Jordan? Like, real? Like, who scouted this?
I'll give you one in football when it gets to my turn.
All right.
At that time, he was a great college basketball player, but he was always hurt. And with Zion, this guy cannot. I mean, he sneezes, he gets hurt. And I think what's going on with a lot of these basketball players is that now they all want to be bodybuilders. They're all like muscular and huge and big. I mean, they look like linebackers now, and they just can't stay healthy because they're so big now. So I don't know if that's what's going on now. I mean, they got the best of everything, and you just see them hurt all the time. And for Zion, he's becoming Gregoden. He's Sambowie category right now. He's really a great player, but that guy cannot stay healthy for the life of it. And why the Pelicans gave him all that money is really mind-boggling to me.
George?
Well, I'm not going to give up on Zion Williamson yet. I mean, he's still young, and I know he's been injury prone, but the fact is he still has years ahead of him. But Sambowie to me was just a complete farce, unfortunately. I mean, he was, like you said, drafted with so much promise and so much potential, and then just crash landed. And same with Greg, But there's always in every sport, there's always these guys. And so I'm going to turn it over to this guy next to me who says he has something about a football player too that he wants to share with us.
The equivalent of taking Sambowie ahead of Michaeljordan was the Lions taking Terry Fair ahead of Randy Moss.
There you go.
That's the equivalent. You're talking about two Hall of Famers versus two bums.
That was good. I can't.
That being said, all three, I agree. Williamson's a little too young. This is his third, fourth year, right? He's on fourth year. It's still too young to call him an actual bust, but the other two definitely were busts. I knew Gregoden was going to be a bust because he came up lame in that national championship. I said, anybody that takes him first overall is going to regret it.
And,
go ahead, Chris.
Jeremy, they did play the Florida Gators that year, and that was the second championship in a row for the Gators. They beat UCLA in 06. It was actually 07 that they beat Ohio State. So whoever was going to play the Gators in that national championship game was going to have problems. But like you guys said, and like you said, Rick, Bowie was drafted ahead of Jordan. So that makes it even worse. Same story with Gregoden. He was drafted ahead of Kevindurant, who may end up becoming the all-time scoring leader one of these days. So that makes it even more magnified when somebody like that was drafted a couple spots behind you, just one spot behind you in Gregoden's case.
Well, I don't know what kind of a week I'm having, but I can't top anything you guys said, so I'm not going to try.
Holy crap. We quieted the Motor City Madhouse. Mark it. That goes on the calendar.
And that's been done a lot this week because what happens when you surround yourself with a good supporting cast? People like you make sure I won't lose my voice, and I'm not losing it tonight. I'll keep drinking my Sunkist Pop and be done with that stuff and let you guys.
I could add another one of those football faux pas by the Lions too, but I don't want to get into that because it's NBA night.
That's right.
That will be every time Chris.
Save it for later, Jeremy.
And the only time that there'll be a topic, only when we mention the Jacksonville Jaguars, where Chris and I expect to do some jamming up at TIA Big Stadium, man. So, all right, well, there's only one more topic to talk about. Then we're going to give Chris Hurdle, our new commentator, his own parting shot. And then he's going to get in the groove next week. We get to all do it. So, all right, with that said, what's your take on the Jamorant situation, Mr. Purtle?
Jamorant, I tell you, he was drafted in that same spot Kevindurant was drafted in, number 2. And his career got off to a good start. Things were going well for Ja, but it seems like over the last year and a half, now that fame and fortune has hit Jamorant has changed a lot. I see a lot of predictions being made by Jamorant, a lot of proclamations about who he's better than, and I just say to myself, this guy needs to just shut up and play and let his game speak for itself. I always thought that Jamorant, and I still do, I don't buy his game from the long range. I know he's got a decent 3-point shooting percentage, but when you get into some serious playoff action, as the Grizzlies finally got a chance to do last year when they met the reigning world champion Golden State Warriors in the second round, and they didn't get the job done in game 5 and 6 and ended up losing that series, that's when you've got to perform. And Jamorant, Now with this latest incident, not a good situation. He's got a $200 million contract on the table. That's now in jeopardy. The dude's got some serious issues that he needs to straighten out. And he's also got to work on his long-range shot. That, to me, that's the issue I want to see him work on. I think he's a good point guard. He's does a lot of good things on the court, but I want to see some better shooting percentages from Jamorant. But it sounds like right now he's got even more serious matters to deal with.
Okay, Rick?
Yeah, one word for me with Jamorant is disappointment. I'm very disappointed in him. He seemed like a good guy, young guy. He really had that drive to win, mature, and I don't know what has happened to him. He allegedly pulled a gun on a teenager or punched him in the face during a pickup game. Like, who does that? Now he's brandishing a gun on Instagram. I mean, how stupid are you to be posting a picture of you inside of a place with a gun? And he's lucky that no charges are going against him with that. They dropped those charges, but him punching his kid, not good. And the sponsor's going to be looking at that. And some of them are going to be like, bye-bye, we don't want you. Some of these young guys, especially all these, it's like they want to be gangsters. They want to be tough. They want to have this image of them, of toughness. And it's just, they look like stupid idiots. And unfortunately for Jamorant, he needs to grow up. And he's going down that, I hate to say, Ben Simmons route, where it's just they have all this money and they just act like idiots. And a lot of them just need to grow up. And unfortunately for Jamorant, he needs to grow up. I hope he straightens out. I really like the guy. But to me, I'm just very, very disappointed in him.
George?
Yeah, I caught Pistons Grizzlies game this year at Little Caesars Arena, and boy, was I impressed with him. This is the best season he's had so far, averaging 27 points a game. Came out of Murray State. You remember that? And they've had a good program for many, many years, Murray State. And I mean, you just can't do this kind of stuff. You can't. And unfortunately, like Rick alluded to, there's so many guys that do this and they try to get away with it, whether it's gangster stuff or rap or whatever. They're linking maybe bad habits from where they grew up. I don't know. But that has to stop. I mean, he's making millions and millions and millions. They gave him a new contract, I remember, and you got to have some common sense. You don't want to throw all that stuff away, but so many of them are falling into this trap, and he cannot go unscathed. Whipping out a gun like that, and things that Rick said that he has done, allegedly. I mean, this stuff's got to stop. He's got to grow up fast because he has a bright future in this league. He just has to grow up.
Jeremy?
You said something there, common sense. Ever since, 1985, common sense has kind of went out the window. I almost want to call it uncommon sense now. That being said, he's acting like an idiot. He's doing his best impression of Plaxico Burress. That's the name you're looking for. Next thing you know, he's going to pull that gun out and shoot himself in the leg and cost him a year out of the league.
That's a great comparison. Plaxico Burress, there's the name of the past. All right, well, all I can tell you is for a while, Jamorant looked like he was on track to have a heck of a career, but how things have changed so much. You know what? I just came up with a parting shot of my own, then I want to, because it is an NBA topic, and I definitely want to address it so everybody can comment on it. Then we're going to go with you, Chris. All right. And this is just developing news that took place today. Patrick Ewing is no longer the coach at Georgetown University, 6 years unsuccessful at his alma mater. So I'm going to ask every one of you guys this, okay? And it's only going to be one question because I want to let Chris have his parting shot as well. Will Patrick Ewing ever resurface in the NBA? Chris?
I think he will. I think somebody will pick him up as an assistant coach. I know he was on the staff in Orlando for a while. So it may have even been on a couple of other staffs that I'm unaware of, but I know he was an assistant coach in Orlando. Got such a huge name in the league. I couldn't imagine that he's not an assistant coach on another NBA team relatively soon.
Yeah, I thought he should have gotten an opportunity as an NBA coach before he went over to Georgetown, for that matter. And I won't muddy the waters too much. But really, I think Juwan Howard should have gotten an opportunity as well, but he landed with Michigan. That'll be for another show. But yeah, okay, so you think he should resurface, Chris, in the NBA?
Yeah, I think somebody will pick him up. Maybe the Knicks will give him a job as an assistant, but I think he'll resurface.
What about you, Rick?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he didn't leave under any controversy. He didn't do anything bad. He just didn't do well, unfortunately, as a head coach. You know, that happens a lot. You see people get fired and right away. Look at Frank Reich. Look at Matt Rule. Got jobs right away. So I think he'll be an assistant. I could actually see him being maybe a head coach in the G League somewhere. You know, that wouldn't surprise me at all. So yeah, he'll be back definitely.
What about you, George?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, Scott. That breaking news today. I'm sorry to see it happen, but boy, they just weren't going anywhere, Georgetown. And as sad as it is to say goodbye to somebody, trust me, I've been through this before. A guy named Alan Trammell had to be let go as Detroit Tigers manager. Right. A hockey player named Ted Lindsay had to be let go by the Detroit Red Wings, where he starred. So I've seen this happen, and it doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. To answer your question, Scott, yes, I see him landing back. He used to coach in the NBA with Washington, Orlando, Charlotte, teams like that as an assistant. I very well see him. He's got a good network, obviously, of NBA peeps. So I would see him coming back to the NBA in some capacity.
What about you, Jeremy?
Hell, hire him for the Pistons now and fire Dwayne Casey. No, I'm just saying.
I don't know why
Georgetown.
Georgetown,
right? Washington, D.C., how much NIL money is there? Not much. So they're not able to get the talent the other teams can get with the NIL money going around in the league this day because it hasn't passed because Washington, D.C. is not a state.
Okay. All right. I'll say a couple of things about Ewing. Then I'm going to turn over to Chris, okay, with your parting shot. Number one, I remember covering the Pistons and the Knicks sitting over on the floor by the Knicks. I'll never forget the look Ewing gave me, a nice, friendly blink look, one of those things. That was pretty cool. And another thing I should point out, in 1982, I was at the NCAA Final Four as a fan when North Carolina took on Georgetown. It was the greatest basketball game I've ever seen in the Final Four with Jordan, Ewing, and the rest. It was just unbelievable. So, yeah, I'm pulling hard for Patrick Ewing. You're right. Maybe he could end up in the G League. So it was breaking news. Why not mention it? All right, Chris, now you get your parting shot.
Okay, and before I go, I've got to say to Smoke and Jeremy there, I see you're a big Dwayne Casey fan, and he's got to be the only coach, and George could probably correct me on this if I'm wrong, but got to be the only coach in the history of the NBA to win the Coach of the Year award and then get fired just months later. And that's exactly what happened to Dwayne Casey in 2018 as he guided the Toronto Raptors to a number one seed, I believe, that season. Won the Coach of the Year and was then subsequently rewarded with a pink slip. So it's crazy what his how his career has gone, and now he finds himself in Detroit, potentially on the hot seat. But as far as my parting shot, now I'll fine tune these in the future. I didn't get a chance to write much today, but I want to talk about the regular season. And do we overemphasize the regular season standings? We see the Denver Nuggets sitting right now in the number one spot in the Western Conference, which is not an easy thing to do. As you guys know, the Western Conference for the past 15 years, it seems like, has been the superior conference in terms of quality teams. And to finish number one in the Western Conference is certainly not an easy thing to do. Obviously, the Denver Nuggets are doing that. But let's take a look at the past couple of seasons and what's happened to regular season number one seeds. Last year, the Phoenix Suns, they finished number one in the Western Conference standings at the end of the season. They actually win 64 games. Pretty impressive. Where do they end up? They end up getting bounced in the second round. The previous year, the Utah Jazz finish as the number one seed in the Western Conference. Again, not an easy thing to do. The West is loaded. Where does that get them? They get bounced in the second round, too, by a team, the Los Angeles Clippers, who had just lost Kawhi Leonard, their best player, halfway through that series. So a golden opportunity, and they still unable to come out of even get past the second round. Go back 2 years ago in the Eastern Conference. The Philadelphia 76ers have a great regular season led by Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. They get the number one seed. What happens to them? Well, this is starting to sound familiar, guys, right? Bounced in the second round. Last year, the Miami Heat They're the number 1 seed. Well, guess what? Nah, this one's not quite as familiar, but they do make it to the conference finals. But none of those 4 teams even made it to the finals. So we've got to pump the brakes, I think, sometimes on anointing these teams that do so well in the regular season as the team to beat, because we really don't know who the team to beat is until we get deep into the playoffs, and usually that's towards the end of the NBA Finals.
Whoa. Well, you know what? I'm going to start off here, and I'm going to teach Chris a new acronym, okay? You know what GMTA stands for?
No.
Great minds think alike. I'm not commenting on this subject, and I got nailed twice on this show because I couldn't have said it better than you. So great minds think alike. That's what I have to say to you. So turn it over to Curdy.
Yeah, I mean, the seeds are, sometimes they can be misleading. Remember the Sonics when they had the number 1 seed and they lost to the 8th seed to the Nuggets? I mean, first time that ever happened. And I think that happened to Miami too, where they were the 1 seed and they lost to the Knicks, who were the 8th seed. Pretty impressive that, huh, Scott? So, I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. It matters where you get to, how you finish. And a lot of people, you see the Warriors are struggling, and I think they're a dangerous team. I think when they get in there, they can, they've been there, done that, got the experience. So I wouldn't count the Warriors out on that. So, so that's one team that I think could be dangerous in the playoffs. So, but it doesn't really matter if you're 1 or as long as you get in the playoffs, you're in. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I remember when the Sonics pulled a big upset, but I'm not saying anymore. I already said I'm not going to say a whole lot, so I'll stick to my GMPA. So with that said, Mr. President said a mouthful with the number 1 seed. What do you want to add to this thing?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but you can't tell teams to slack off or anything like that. I mean, they're playing as hard as and we just talked about that. We want teams to compete, and we want to see fans seeing all the stars. So it's a delicate balance, I think, on that one, Chris. I do compare it, though, a little bit to hockey, because that has been a jinx also, winning the President's Trophy, it's called, where teams get the most points in the season. And lo and behold, time and time again, just like you illustrated in the NBA, it happens in the NHL as well.
Right.
And I don't know what it is. I think maybe peak too soon, overconfidence, number of factors could be going on here in the team's playoff run. But it is ironic, though, like you said, that so many of them do get bounced out. But I would never be in favor of them, taking a load off or taking a night off and benching a certain amount of guys just to rest them, because I don't believe in that either.
Okay, Jeremy.
You know why these number 1 seeds get the number 1 seed? If you look, they have the least amount of load management because their players play almost every game. And hands down. But that's also why they're tired. And why do they get bounced in the second round? Because of the play-in game, because now the 1st seed gets a bye. So they don't play in the first week. That's their first tournament. So they sat a week. It's the rest versus rust, just like in the NFL. And you know what? We finally had 2 teams that won conferences in the NFL and go straight through the Super Bowl to face each other. That's the first time that's happened in how long, guys?
Long time.
Been a while.
Yeah. So that being said, in the NBA, where there's more games, it's a longer, grueling season overall because they play more games in the same amount of time span. I mean, they only play 6 months a year, too, just like the NFL of regular season, and then they go on to their playoffs. But they also play a series of games in the playoffs, and we wonder why the teams start to get hurt in the playoffs and everything else. It's a grueling season. I think if you want teams to start playing every game to win out, and that way the only teams that end up with lottery picks are the ones that actually do suck, we need to take it back to 60 games or 70 games.
Yeah, and it doesn't always work out like this every year. But while it has been, I thought I would bring up this point. And to your point too, Smoke and Jeremy, last year this previous Super Bowl we just saw a few weeks ago, it was 2 number 1 seeds that played each other. Last year it was 2 number 4 seeds that played each other when the Rams faced the Bengals. And George, when the Golden State Warriors started winning championships 8 years ago, they were head and shoulders above the rest in the regular season. They won 67 games in 2015 en route to their first championship with this group of players. They won 73 games the following season en route to a Game 7 in the NBA Finals, which they got beat by the Cleveland Cavaliers, then brought in Kevindurant in that third year and won 68 games in the regular season, and they were the number one seed, I believe, just about every year. Houston may have got the number one seed that third year, but they did perform well in the regular season. So it doesn't always work out like it has the past couple of years. It's not going to always be like that. But while it has been, I thought I would point that out and make it my parting shot.
Well, no, your parting shot was phenomenal. You got us all thinking. I mean, and you got me quiet for a second anyways. But one sport we really have left out of this whole equation is Major League Baseball. Play 162 games, and how many teams with the best record ever win it? To me, it's a hot team in the playoffs that ultimately gets there. So how many times does the wild card team emerge as a world champion? But that'll be for another day. But it certainly validates a lot of what you're saying, Chris. I mean, just because you have the best season in the regular season. Remember when the Tigers played the Cardinals recently and it was a rust versus rest situation? I think the Tigers, if they had continued playing instead of having the rest, that could have been a different outcome, but we'll never know. But no, Chris, I think your parting shot is definitely fantastic, and I'm glad you brought it up and thought of it. You don't have to write everything. There comes a point you have to think on your feet, and you did exactly that. So you're thinking on your feet, and you get us all thinking. That's a good shot, man, and a great first act for you tonight, Chris. And we're looking for more. We're looking for you to duplicate these on the Chris Pirtle Xerox copy machine between the ears called a brain. Good stuff.
You got it, Scott. I'm happy to do it, and good to be with you.
This concludes this edition of the Sports Exchange. Before we let everybody go, though, Chris Pirtle, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
Yes, you can follow me on Facebook at my name, Chris Pirtle, Pirtle. You can also follow me on Twitter at Vero Sports. That's VER as in Vero Beach, and then sports. So at Vero Sports on Twitter.
All right, Rick. Well, before I get to, go ahead, Rick, and then I'll go to our stuff, and then I'll go ahead over to George and Jeremy. All right, Rick, go ahead.
You can find me on my website, www.charlottebats.com. Please go on there, sign the petition. We want to bring Major League Baseball to Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm also on Facebook at Charlotte MLB, Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm also on Instagram at Charlotte Bats, Twitter, Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm on LinkedIn under Rick Curdy. And if you have any comments or questions, you can email me at cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com.
Yeah, Rick does it great for us on social media. Before I turn over to George, I should let everybody know that the Sports Exchange can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. So you can hear it, or you can see it. So please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Good stuff. Please share it with your friends, family, and all that business, right, Jeremy? Okay, and I'll let you go ahead and give me the audio replay your style. Want to be a guest? Send topic ideas to southfloridatribune@gmail.com. You want to advertise? Call 954-304-4941. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and our YouTube channel. I should also point out our website is www.southfloridatribune.com, which is where these broadcasts ultimately wind up anyways. And you can reach me on Twitter at Tribune South. Don't think I'm forgetting anything except for the fact that I want to thank Candy Ebling, who does a phenomenal job putting this whole operation together. You know, she appears on lots of shows, and well as she's the backbone of what we do on the Tribune, and we're eternally grateful for her as well. All right, Jeremy, go ahead.
And don't forget, when you subscribe to the YouTube channel, go ahead and like the video and then share it with all your sports fans. No matter what show you're watching, whether it's Fire Up Michigan, Fire Up Wisconsin, Fire Up, the Sports Exchange, all of them. Just get them out there.
Okay, now it's your turn. For you.
For me, okay. Well, I am one of the writers for the South Florida Tribune. You can find me under the Motor City Tribune heading, and under the list of authors, I'm also a consultant for Scott here. And you can find me on any one of these shows whenever he wants me. I'm his chameleon. I fit in and I go. That being said, you can also find me on my YouTube channel. That's Kneecap Biting with Smoking Jeremy B, where I talk about the NFL every other Wednesday and Detroit Lions every Friday. Come on over and check us out. I'm on Twitter also at Smoking Jeremy B and at Ballrick Jeremy T.
And last but not least, my partner in crime for the last 33 years at ABC Radio when I was a producer, Chris. That's how far we go. Go ahead, George.
Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the air. And we've got some great NBA announcers in Detroit history. I'll mention a couple of them: Milt Hopwood, Paul Carey, Mark Champion, and George Blaha. And you can find them in the book. You can find Scott in the book as well. Scott's interviewing Muhammad Ali and Jimmy Connors in the book. It's loaded with great pictures and a wonderful historical perspective of sports broadcasting and announcing in Detroit and Michigan. There's a link to buy the book. It's not free, unfortunately, but you got to buy it. And it's on the Motor City Tribune website, which I also write, as Jeremy does, for the South Florida Tribune and the Detroit Monitor newspaper. You can reach me on LinkedIn under George Eichhorn. You can also email me at gichorn@yahoo.com, or on Twitter, reach me at sandgsports99. You can hear me on 108 Stitches. You can hear me on the Sports Exchange. You can hear me on Fire Up. And Scott and I have been doing this kind of thing for 43 years, and I'm proud to be part of his network of programs here. Thank you.
And just so you know, once again, if you didn't hear it earlier, I'm wearing this Jacksonville Jaguars hat because of Chris Pirtle. And he's wearing his Green Bay Packers shirt. Traveling. So a little bit of gratitude going both sides here, and I'm looking forward to working with Chris up in Jacksonville. But before we get up there, Chris, we got a lot of good stuff in our pocket here, don't we, my friend?
A lot of good stuff. And if I could say something real quick, sure. Speaking of shirts and that kind of thing, Jeremy, if you can bring back the Lions hat, I'd really appreciate it, because it looks great on you. And that was an awesome hat you were wearing last week too, by the way.
You're talking about the coach hat like Campbell wears, the one I was wearing, or the one that was black with the stuff across?
It had a huge lion on it. That's all I remember. It seemed like an extra big lion for some reason. I don't know why it was so big. Yeah, but it was awesome. I've got a shirt just like it, and you know what? I'm going to wear it next week. As a matter of fact, the last time I saw George Eichhorn live, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I was wearing that exact same shirt. I'm a huge George Eichhorn fan, as a matter of fact. Instant bond with George, and then I went up and had lunch with him in Sterling Heights, Michigan, back in October. So I'm looking forward to getting back up to Michigan sometime this year and seeing George live again. George, always a pleasure.
Thank you,
Charlotte Bats, Rick, I didn't know you were Charlotte Bats, so we're already Facebook friends, and I look forward to conversing more with you in the future, my friend. I love what you're doing there in Charlotte, and I certainly wish you nothing but the best, and look forward to building a bond with you in the future as well. And Scott, you can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity to be on with you and the rest of these guys.
Well, you know what?
When you talk about him being Charlotte Bats, all I know is Charlotte Bats networks more than a pimp next to a Navy base on payday.
Well, hey, listen, you know what, Chris? You know, you and George obviously got to meet each other first, but now you and I and George are teammates. Obviously, Jeremy and Rick are in the mix too. So let me tell you something, folks. It's great to have people that you can work with and you respect heavily. And we're trying to build something special here. And we hope that everybody can be a part of the whole thing. So, yeah, you know what, Chris, Jeremy, you two are the latest great additions that we have. And I'm looking forward to a whole lot more fun. And the one thing I told Chris Pirtle was when we were on the phone, if you can't have fun and have a blast, you don't need to be with us, because we run a loose, fun ship. And I'll tell you what, I don't mind mentioning that either. This is the type of thing where everybody gets an opportunity to speak their mind in a very laid-back way, and we just hope that we're doing the best we can to entertain everybody. And if you have any stress during the day, you join us a little while, get your mind thinking. And even though I'm not Aaron Rodgers where I can relax, right now I don't keep relaxing either for a while. And we'll see what happens. I won't bring that topic up. I just know.
Just turn the lights out. You'll relax.
Yeah, go into your darkness and retreat. Or drink your kombucha juice or whatever he does.
Well, that may seem strange here, but you know what? For a little while today, after I was done with social media, it was dark in here when Candy came back home. So I had my little hour darkness retreat playing my iPad Pro and word blog game. So that was as far as I went. So
I don't have my parting shot, but I do have my parting saying for you, Scott.
What's that?
What I would like our viewers to do.
What's that?
Try every day to be a better person than you were the day before, because that's the only way to make the world a better place.
Attaboy. Amen. But meanwhile, Jeremy, you do have my permission on the Thursday night show because of Chris Pirtle to wear that one hat. Okay. And that's okay. That's your hat and head attire for that particular show on Thursday. We don't want to turn Chris down and give him an opportunity to see in that hat. No way. All right. With that said, once again, this concludes this edition of the Sports Exchange NBA Talk. Looking for a lot more NBA insights from Chris in the future, as well as making Thursday pretty much NBA night. And that's what we've got here. And I'm really pleased with our first act together talking about the sport that George and I had a great opportunity to cover when we were working with the Bad Boys and long before that. So once again, on behalf of Smoking Jeremy B, George Eichhorn, Rick Curdy, and Chris Pirtle, my name is Scott Morgan, Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange. And everybody, have yourself a great, relaxing weekend, and we will see you next time. Goodbye now.
Good night.
Bye.
Right.